Let's first open a model. Here we will select truck.key as the model file. Now let's select a result file. Let's select the D3 plot file. Apply is selected to load the model and result file into the session. Within the results browser, we will select the Show Hide tool. Right-clicking on a component in the graphics area will hide the component. Left-clicking on a component in the graphics area will show the component. Next, let's expand the Components folder. By right-clicking on a component and selecting Hide, we can turn off the display of the component. We can also right-click on the component and select Show to turn the display back on. After clicking on the Components folder and then selecting Display None, all the components are hidden. Clicking on Display All will turn all of them back on. Next, we will use the Isolate tool. After we select the Isolate tool, we can select a component in the Results browser, and the component is isolated in the graphics area. To get out of the isolation mode, we simply need to select the Isolate tool again. We can also isolate a component by right-clicking on the component in the list and selecting Isolate. We can turn on the display of all the components by right-clicking on the Components folder and selecting Show. We can also change the style of the component through the Results browser. By right-clicking on the Style icon next to the component, we can change the style to shaded with mesh lines. We can also change the element color by right-clicking on the color and selecting a new color from the color palette. Now let's take a look at the Mask panel. If we select elements using the quick selection method of holding down Shift and drawing a box, the elements are automatically masked. We can unmask elements by selecting Unmask as the action and then use the same quick selection method. Now let's unmask all of the elements by selecting Unmask All. We can change the entities we are selecting from elements to components. Let's change the action back to Mask, select a component, and then select Mask Selected. If we use the quick selection method of holding down Shift and drawing a box, the components are automatically masked. Let's change the action back to Unmask and again use the quick selection method to unmask the components. Just to make sure everything is unmasked, let's select Unmask All. Let's change the action back to Mask and select the cabin component in the graphics area. We can click on Components to launch the Extended Entity Selector and select By Attached to add the components that are attached to the cabin component to the selection. Now when we select Mask Selected, not only is the cabin component masked, but so are the attached components. By selecting Reject, we can reject the previous action. Now let's create some new sets. This is done by selecting Model, Create, Sets from the menu bar. We can create a new set by selecting Add. To rename the set, let's right-click on the name Set 8 and select Rename. Let's rename the set to Truck 1. Let's change the entity selection to Components and select the truck bed and right rear tire. The components are added to the set by selecting Add to Set. Let's add another set named Truck 2. We'll select 2 more components and then select Add to Set. Next, let's change the draw style to shaded. Notice how both components are colored in a blue color, which is the color for the set. Next, let's export the set. We'll define a location and a name for the file. And then select OK to export the sets to the file. OK, so next let's clear the session by selecting File, New Session. Let's load the same model and results file into the session and then return to the Sets panel. In order to bring the saved sets into the current session, let's select Import. We will leave the format set to HyperView and then browse for the file we just saved. We can sort the set list by clicking on the Sets column. This made it easy for us to locate the sets Truck 1 and Truck 2. First, we will select Truck 1 and change the draw style to shaded. We will also change the draw style for Truck 2 to shaded. Using the results browser, we will hide the display of all the components. Now let's expand the Sets folder to view all the sets in the model. If we right-click on Sets, we can select Hide to hide all the sets as well. Scrolling down, we found our set Truck 1. We can right-click on Truck 1 and select Show. This turns on the display of the two components in the set. We will repeat this process for the set Truck 2.